Overall, we've been disappointed by the Star Wars series on D+. Mando Seasons 1 and 2 and Andor Season 1 were anomalies. You blame the writers, and I agree with you. Bad writing is a theme now. However, in this era of Hollywood buffoonery, I've flagged other problems. The sequel trilogy, the Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, Ahsoka, The Acolyte. Most productions lacked competent leadership. Who is the showrunner? Heck, the studio lacks competent leadership. It doesn't have a visionary with the skills or authority to create one story, let alone multiple stories that coalesce over a decade.
I would agree with that. I think this goes back to my Star Trek talk, and I'm sorry we're a Star Wars channel and I keep bringing up Star Trek. My apologies. Hit like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. For example, when you had Star Trek Next Generation, well, and we'll take the Gene Roddenberry thing out of it, all the weird stuff with him. You had showrunners, executive producers who were intimately involved with all of the production aspects, the writing, the special effects, the directing, set design, all that stuff. And then they created a show Bible, which was, these are all the things going on in the Federation. These are all the things about our main characters. These are the things you can do. These are the things you cannot do. These are the rules of the universe. So if you're writing something about warp speed, this is how it works, right? They had this big fat binder that they gave all their writers. So when they were writing these episodes, they knew, okay, season 4, the overarching story is the succession of the Klingon leadership or whatever, right? But we're going to have all these other episodes. We're going to have a couple of 2-parters. Okay, great. So you guys got to write all this shit. Well, get your show Bible, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to stick to this, right? And so now when you have 10 different people writing episodes for a show, because they're drawing from the source material and they're being forced to, and everything they write is being pre-screened before it ever gets to being filmed. And so the producers are saying, does this fit? Does this match our narrative? And then when you get all these different directors, so people are directing different episodes, really what it comes down to at that point is, with the Bible and with the producers being involved, what you get from the different directors is fun and interesting and unique camera angles or lighting or locations. Maybe maybe you'd ask the guys, hey, can we make a planet that looks kind of like this or whatever? But you're not changing the characters. You're not changing their motivations, their morals, their ethics. You might be putting them in positions that tests those things, but you're never, you're not breaking them. You're not breaking their type. And then ultimately you're not allowed to kill certain people, right? So you can't do that. That is a system that's in place, but it's also very much a product of long format production again, right? We have short format production. You would think it would be easier, but the amount of effort that people put into a long format show, you can't necessarily put into a short format show. The thing with Star Wars being the property that it is, the intellectual property that it is, and the amount of lore and the amount of stuff that's out there. I mean, that was the role that kind of George played back in the day when they were doing Clone Wars. This is where I wanted to go. The writers come with the scripts. He's like, yep, nope, or somewhere in between. Filoni was part of that. People were writing and bringing things, and George was always the final say because he had the vision. So the problem is with the people who are supposed to be the stewards of Star Wars, the ones who are ultimately in charge don't have that vision. And they, quite frankly, I don't even think they care about what Lucas's vision was or is or could be. And they don't really feel any loyalty to that in any way. And this is all played out in conversations and interviews with people like Kathleen Kennedy and others, Bob Iger, all these people they brought in, the writers, Pablo Hidalgo, all these guys, Dave Filoni. And they don't really care about any of that stuff. They care about their own little pet projects and their own personal politics. And so they make the shows that they want to make. and they just put the Star Wars shirt on it. The thing that was really enlightening to me recently that you cited in one of the previous videos is the whole conversation that Leslie Headland had about her management style, or as a producer, as a showrunner, as someone, as a creative or whatever, and how she said, why I didn't manage the show. She came up with some BS political reason for not wanting to be a manager. And I feel that in the creative community of Hollywood and in other areas, whether it be the music industry or whatever, there's a lot of that where we have sort of the anti-achievement mentality. Everyone needs to get along, and everybody needs to be nice, and everybody needs to hug each other and have safe spaces and all that stuff. And we spend so much time worrying about that crap that we don't actually get anything done. And when it does get done, it comes out and it looks like The Acolyte, and you're like, what is this? Like, what exactly is this show even about? What is it trying to achieve? Who are these characters? These are all questions we had after the show was over. And there should be some kind of, again, oversight. It feels like Kathleen Kennedy, like if we go back and we look at the Solo debacle, she hired these guys, said, go make me a Star Wars movie about Han Solo. We had a fairly trusted writer, so everybody felt good about it. And then she went off and vacationed in the Hamptons or whatever. And then right before the movie's supposed to go into post-production, she comes back and she's like, what do you mean it's a musical? She wasn't involved. She wasn't paying attention. And so who's like you say, who's the showrunner, air quotes? And then is that showrunner a strong enough personality to execute the vision? And one of the other things that we've seen about Lucasfilm is that they are very prone, just like some of the Disney modern Disney Marvel stuff, is that we just start filming it and we'll fix it in editing. We've seen some productions, again, with Acolyte and with others, where stuff's just happening. We're just going to film it and we'll see what we can put together. The Obi-Wan show is that way a little bit with some of the stuff they talked about. You've heard these interviews with people. So again, I think a lot of these problems that we're seeing with Disney, I mean, some of the things are more obvious than others, right? You can blame a writer or a director or a producer, but it's really, there's enough blame to go around, but we might start to see more improvement over time. I don't know.
Jon Favreau and Tony Gilroy are the only effective showrunners to date. Unfortunately, Favreau's The Mandalorian crashed and burned in Season 3. Gilroy's and/or Season 2 will premiere in April. Based on the quality of Season 1, we're hoping for great things. You and I will record an and/or review and preview video soon. Subscribe to Galactic Initiative, click the bell for notifications. Strong, successful showrunners / directors strengthen the auteur theory, or as Leslie Headland calls it, the auteur myth. We know Kathleen Kennedy doesn't hire for talent and performance, she hires for other criteria. So Star Wars suffers the indignity of The Acolyte.
100%. It's the leadership at the top. Obviously, they do the hiring, right? Yeah, I'm pretty much inclined nowadays with Star Wars that anytime Leslie Headland says something, I just do the opposite because that's probably the right thing.
Yeah, a smart guideline. Well, all is not as it should be. Few watched Skeleton Crew. I had no use for it. You had mixed feelings about it. In fact, viewership for Kennedy film projects has sunk to irrelevance. Top 10 most watched lists are a fantasy. For Star Wars, once the most beloved IP in entertainment history. But let's focus on Skeleton Crew as the latest multi-million-dollar sacrifice. Some say it was great, some say it was terrible. It was definitely caught in the Acolyte's backwash. Why didn't a significant number of people watch it?
Yeah, that is a good question. So there's a couple things going on there, I think. And first one is we are now sort of at the tail end of a long series of very poorly executed and politically divisive Star Wars content. And I know you have too, as fans have watched, right, since Disney took it over. We've watched lifelong Star Wars fans up to that point start to check out, whether because we're gluttons for punishment or we're secretly masochistic, we've stayed on to this point. There are people like several people in our social circle, like when we walked out of the theater after The Force Awakens, person that we know walked away from the Star Wars franchise, saying that The Force Awakens was the most expensive fan film he'd ever seen, and it was trash, and that they've killed Star Wars and he's done with it. Now, that makes him a clairvoyant, but some of us were like, well, Force Awakens was, but, it wasn't bad, and it's a reboot, and okay, it set the table, let's see where they go with it. We gave it some goodwill. And then we saw Rogue One. This is Star Wars, like, let's go. We all hung on, and then we went and watched The Last Jedi, and we all like, okay, that was shit. It's doing the thing with the fans. And there were people who were very angry, and then Solo came out, and a lot of people didn't watch Solo because they were mad about The Last Jedi. And I think that some of the stuff that we're seeing now with the viewership numbers of the Disney streaming Star Wars series, and this started before Acolyte. I mean, say what you want about Acolyte being politically divisive and all the problems, the PR problems that Disney Lucasfilm had based on the interactions of the writer, director, showrunner, and the actors, and all of that stuff, and then all the shills in the social media spaces that were basically attack dogs for Lucasfilm. It started before that. I mean, we really started to realize that there's a lack of quality when it came to Kenobi and the Ahsoka show. But then we get this boon of Andor, right? We're like, oh, this is good Star Wars TV. Why can't you guys make more of that? We love this. But there was so much fatigue at that point for bad Star Wars that not a lot of people initially watched it. And so while a lot of people like ourselves were giving it high praise, there was a lot of people who were just tired of bad Star Wars at that point, and they just didn't want to be burned again. And I think that we're seeing an ever tightening death spiral around the IP because of this stuff. The people who hang on are like, oh, well, hang on. And then they get a bad show and they're like, I'm out. And then there's somebody's like, well, we got a good show and this one's a bad show. Maybe the next one will be good. And then they get a good show and they're like, see, and they hang on. Then they get a bad show and they're like, I'm out. And I think that we're just at the point now with Skeleton Crew where there's a lot of people who just won't be fooled anymore. And they might even be hearing good things. Like, you and I were joking about this earlier, that some of the voices on YouTube and other social media spaces that we check in with regularly to kind of get the pulse of the angry fan, when they were initially praising Skeleton Crew, a lot of us we were kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're like, okay, is this a joke video? Is this real? Because usually they're mad about Star Wars all the time. And so I think a lot of people, even from people that they might trust as a voice for them in their fandom, even when those people come out and say, yeah, it's not that bad, you guys should check it out, they're still suspicious. But I'll watch Andor before I watch Skeleton Crew. And the sad thing, that you've mentioned in some of your other videos is that's considered high praise right now for Disney Star Wars. Your show didn't suck, so I'll watch it, I guess. And that is considered a success now at Disney Lucasfilm. Now, you're talking about a cultural phenomena that touches every corner of the globe. Everyone, no matter language, culture, they all know what Star Wars is on some level. And we've gone from that to you can't get a Star Wars TV show in the top 10 streaming titles on all platforms. And this spells doom for the brand and for Disney Lucasfilm, because if you can't even get solid viewership for a medium, okay, non-offensive Star Wars show, you're really screwed. I don't know how you're going to get people back in movie theaters, right? That's sort of like the death rattle of the franchise, and it's sad to see.
Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The name Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, all rights reserved. Galactic Initiative is a registered trademark, and other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement.